I recently saw a TikTok of an Elden Ring mod in which the player, as Artorias the Abyss Walker from Dark Souls 1, but this is like the Night Rain version, impales Malenia and throws her away like trash. When I opened the comments, I saw users debating who would win in a battle to the death. And while some comments said that Artorias would wash Malenia, and most comments said that Malenia would absolutely destroy Artorias, like the coughing baby versus the atomic bomb meme, I'm here to put like my 2 cents forward here to say that this fight is actually closer than you might think. And some rules I would like to establish here before I start talking about it is like what versions of the two characters I will be discussing, and it would be in the versions of them in their prime. This means that Prime Artorias hasn't been consumed by the Abyss and doesn't have a broken arm, as well as wields his great shield. Meanwhile, Prime Malenia would actually be when she has been consumed by the rot and become a true goddess. Basically, Malenia when we fight her in Elden Ring. Some of you may argue that Malenia in her prime, maybe when she wasn't blind, had legs, had her arm back, and maybe I would agree with you, but according to the prosthesis wearer heirloom, when Malenia had encountered her mentor and his flowing blade, she gained wings of unparalleled strength, meaning that Malenia's strength had unfathomably increased when training under her mentor. And while we don't have any exact correlation as to what extent her rot had affected her when she underwent this training, I believe it was most likely when she was already blind, as the blue dancer charm talisman states that the dancer in blue represents a fairy who in legend bestowed a flowing sword upon a blind swordsman, with of course the blind swordsman being Malenia's mentor, and it would only make sense that someone who's blind would mentor another who's blind. It's just like classic storytelling stuff, like Stick and Daredevil, if you watched the Netflix TV show, type shit. Therefore, if Malenia gained unparalleled strength when she trained under her mentor, it could be safe to assume that her prime would be after that time, when she's already blind and presumably already lost her arm due to the rot, since the talisman that describes the unparalleled strength is the prosthesis wearer heirloom. With that said, the reason why I'm not going into discussion about Artorias overtaken by the Abyss versus Prime Malenia is because she would most likely beat his ass if he was not on his A game. While him being affected by the Abyss does give him some very interesting abilities, his power is just far too wounded by Manus for him to be considered as a being of fairness win against Malenia, right? His body is just too battered and injured. His power is actually weaker than he would be in his prime. The two may have arms beyond repair, but Malenia got a metal arm blade, while Artorias got nothing at all to compensate for his broken arm. Now, as far as like the actual fight goes, let's address the main big hurdles that Artorias would have to face when going up against Malenia. Firstly, and most obviously, her combat skill, and especially her skill with the blade. While Artorias may seem unimpressive when you see him in the game, as we do only see him at his lowest, like damn, this doesn't necessarily mean that he's a bum. In fact, he's actually one of the 4 personally appointed knights of Gwyn. And it is through this association with the 3 other knights that it could be safely assumed that Artorias has most likely fought dragons. Ornstein and Go, 2 of the other Knights of Gwyn, certainly have dragon slaying capabilities, as Ornstein's spear was made to cut through the hide of dragons. And Go, of course, shot the dragon Calamite out of the sky while blind. So it is in that same sense that Artorias also has that capability to take down a dragon, but most likely not ancient dragons from Dark Souls 1, which could only be brought down by lightning, and most likely the dragon descendants that you see in the gameplay of Dark Souls 1 mostly, and Dark Souls 3 and whatnot, like the wyverns and the drakes, as Artorias hasn't shown that he could use lightning at all, so he probably couldn't kill an ancient dragon. So when fighting Malenia, he wouldn't just be thrown around like a ragdoll. In fact, though, he might just go toe-to-toe with someone like Radahn. Now, that might be far-fetched, Really far-fetched. So good thing we're not arguing that, but Malenia has gone toe-to-toe with Radahn, so it's important to mention his name, and that obviously she's a crazy fighter, you know, having gone to a stalemate with Radahn, right? But Artorias has skills of his own, right? He still has more of a chance against her than like Godric does, for example. And this is because he actually knows how to fight. As his wolf ring item description says that he was unmatched with a great sword. And while Malenia's own prowess is unparalleled, Artorias is on that similar playing field of unmatched skill. Secondly, her Scarlet Explosion, basically the shift from her first phase to her second phase, her becoming the rock goddess, basically, you know, the blossom that she used to one-shot Radahn at the end of their fight, right? And that knocked her out as well. So essentially, it seems like in this phase specifically, when she becomes the goddess of rot, that Artorias, it seems like he doesn't really have a chance at all, right? Prime or not, and this guy's getting washed. But it's actually due to something in Artorias' arsenal that actually gives him an advantage against Malenia's final form as the goddess of rot, and is actually his shield, also known as the Cleansing Great Shield. Also, take note that he uses a great sword and a great shield, right? That guy has strength. That guy had a lot of strength in his stats. But it's because of this shield that would not only save Artorias from this goddess of rot, but would actually render her rot utterly useless against him. The Great Shield of Artorias item description states that it boasts consistent defense and divine protection against various status effects, meaning that it would most likely have complete and utter divine protection against Malenia's Scarlet Rot, right? And her Scarlet Bloom specifically, and possibly a constant effect as well, which means that his shield would protect him indefinitely during their fight. Artorias had also used the Cleansing Shield to form a barrier to protect his compatriot Sif, meaning that Artorias could also equally create complete and utter barrier surrounding himself when fighting Malenia, though I would assume that this would most likely be a final resort tactic in which he would try to warp away or escape while within the barrier, as Sif did, since the barrier actually drained the shield after it was used on Sif, and never had that capability ever again when the player obtains it. But I doubt that Artorias would actually use this barrier and try to warp away, as his shield, without the barrier, seems pretty overpowered. Puts him on a very even playing field with Malenia and her Scarlet Rot, at least. Also, a fun fact, Night Rain Artorias has a huge resistance to Scarlet Rot.